Putin demands favor. But he had miscalculated. Trump had been expecting this call for months. Vlad, Trump's voice was ice cold, using the diminutive form of Putin's name like a power play. When you call the President of the United States at 4 a.m., it better be because Moscow is on fire. So what's burning? The pause that followed lasted exactly 7 seconds. Trump counted them. In those 7 seconds, he could practically feel Putin's discomfort radiating through the encrypted connection. This wasn't the Trump who had once praised Putin's intelligence. This was the leader of the world's most powerful nation, and Putin was about to learn the difference. The desperate proposition. Mr. President, I'm calling because I believe we have an opportunity to reset our relationship, Putin began, his voice carrying that familiar mix of authority and charm that had worked on so many world leaders before. The sanctions regime that has been in place, it serves neither of our country's interests. Trump said nothing. Silence was a weapon, and he wielded it masterfully. Let Putin fill the void. Let him reveal his desperation. The global economy is suffering, Putin continued, his voice betraying the slightest hint of strain. Energy prices are artificially inflated. Supply chains are disrupted. Surely a pragmatic leader like yourself can see that these sanctions hurt American consumers as much as they hurt Russia. Still silence from Trump, but inside, he was smiling. Putin was already showing his cards, and they were weaker than expected. I have a proposal, Putin pressed on, his voice gaining false confidence. A comprehensive agreement that would benefit both our nations, mutual energy partnerships, reduced nuclear arsenals, coordination on China. He paused, playing what he thought was his ace card. And perhaps most importantly for you, Mr. President, significant business opportunities for American companies in post-sanctions Russia. Opportunities worth hundreds of billions. Trump let the silence stretch another 5 seconds before responding with a single word that would echo through history. No. The brutal reality check. No? Putin's voice cracked slightly. In 30 years of wielding power, from his KGB days to his presidency, he had rarely been dismissed so curtly. You heard me correctly, Vladimir. Trump's use of the full name was deliberate, formal, cold. The answer is no. Not just no, hell no. What came next was 18 minutes of the most devastating diplomatic destruction in modern history. Trump didn't just reject Putin's proposal, he systematically dismantled every assumption the Russian president had made about their relationship, about American priorities, and about Putin's own position in the world. Let me explain something to you, Vlad, since you seem confused about how this works now. Trump's voice carried the authority of someone who had learned hard lessons about power and how to wield it absolutely. You seem to think I'm the same guy who left office 4 years ago. You think you can call me up at 4 a.m., offer me some business deals, and I'll roll over like a lapdog. But you've made a fundamental miscalculation. Putin tried to interrupt, but Trump steamrolled right over him. You invaded Ukraine. You threatened nuclear war. You murdered dissidents on foreign soil. You cyber-attacked American infrastructure. You interfered in American elections. And now you think you can call me up and negotiate like we're old friends making a real estate deal? Are you out of your mind? The silence from Moscow was deafening. The American position. Here's what's actually going to happen, Vladimir, and you better listen carefully because I'm only going to say this once. Trump's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. Not only am I not lifting sanctions, I'm expanding them. Next week, I'm signing the most comprehensive sanctions package in American history. We're going to freeze every Russian asset we can find. We're going to ban every Russian bank from the international system. We're going to make sure that any company anywhere in the world that does business with Russia loses access to American markets. Putin's breathing was audible through the connection now. But that's just the beginning, Trump continued, building to a crescendo that would be remembered by everyone who would later read the classified transcript. You want to know what real American power looks like? I'm ending all energy imports from Russia to North America, zero. And I'm calling every ally we have, Europe, Japan, South Korea, Australia, home. And I'm telling them to do the same. We're going to isolate you so completely that your only trading partners will be North Korea and whoever else is desperate enough to take your worthless rubles. The economic implications were staggering, and Putin knew it. Russia's economy would be reduced to a rounding error in global markets, the personal humiliation. But Trump wasn't finished. What came next was personal, calculated to destroy Putin's carefully constructed image as a strong leader. You know what the most pathetic part of this call is, Vlad? The fact that you made it at all. The Vladimir Putin I used to know would never have begged, never would have shown weakness, never would have called his adversary at 4 a.m. like some desperate telemarketer trying to make quota. The words hit Putin like physical blows. Your economy is collapsing. Your military is a joke. We've seen how they perform against Ukrainian farmers with Every major economy in the world is going to have cut off Russia completely. Your economy isn't just going to be damaged, Vlad, it's going to be destroyed. Completely, permanently destroyed. The personal destruction. But Trump saved the most devastating attack for last. This wasn't just about economics or geopolitics. This was personal. You know what the saddest part of all this is, Vladimir? You used to be someone I could respect, disagree with, oppose, but respect. You were a serious leader of a serious country. But this call, this desperate, pathetic begging, you've shown me that you're not a leader anymore. You're just a scared old man watching his empire crumble and begging his enemies to throw him a lifeline. The words were calculated to destroy Putin's self-image as much as his public image. Real leaders take responsibility for their mistakes. Real leaders find solutions to their war problems. Real leaders don't call their adversaries at 4 a.m. begging for help. What you've done tonight isn't diplomacy, Vlad. It's surrender, and the whole world is going to know it. Putin tried one last time to salvage something from the conversation. Mr. President, surely we can find some middle ground, some compromise that serves both our interests. Trump cut him off with finality. There is no middle ground. There is no compromise. There is only one way this ends. With Russia isolated, weakened, and irrelevant on the global stage, and you, Vladimir Putin, will be remembered as the leader who begged America for mercy and was told no. The historic conclusion. This conversation is over, Trump declared with the authority of someone who had just redefined the global balance of power. Don't call this number again unless you're ready to discuss the terms of Russia's complete surrender. And Vlad, next time you want to negotiate with America, remember this moment. Remember what happens when you come to us from a position of weakness. The line went dead. Putin sat in his private study in the Kremlin, staring at the phone in his hand, listening to the dial tone that marked the end of Russia's hopes for economic relief and the beginning of its complete isolation from the global community. In 18 minutes, he had gone from a regional power broker to an international pariah begging for scraps. The immediate aftermath. Within hours, the story began to leak exactly as Trump had promised. Strategic sources within the administration confirmed to key journalists that Putin had indeed called the White House in the early morning hours, seeking sanctions relief. The details were devastating: a desperate leader, a humiliating rejection, and the promise of even harsher measures to come. By noon, the Kremlin was in full crisis mode. Peskov, Putin's spokesman, held an emergency press conference denying that any such call had taken place, but the damage was already done. The very fact that they felt compelled to deny it confirmed its truth in the minds of international observers. In Moscow's financial district, oligarchs were making frantic calls to their wealth managers in London and Geneva, trying to move what assets they could before the promised economic apocalypse arrived. The ruble, already weak, began a free fall that would continue for weeks. The global response. Trump's promised calls to allied leaders went exactly as he had predicted. Macron, initially skeptical, was convinced when he heard selected portions of the recorded conversation. Scholz, always cautious about economic warfare, agreed that Putin's desperation showed the sanctions were working and should be intensified. Kishida saw an opportunity to demonstrate Japan's commitment to the Western alliance. Within 72 hours, the coordinated response was unprecedented in its scope and severity. The European Union announced a complete economic embargo on Russia. Japan froze all Russian assets in Japanese banks. South Korea banned all Russian vessels from its ports. Australia terminated all trade agreements with Moscow. But the most devastating blow came from an unexpected source: China. Xi Jinping, seeing which way the wind was blowing and unwilling to be on the wrong side of a global economic war, quietly instructed Chinese banks to limit their exposure to Russian entities. Without Chinese support, Russia's economic isolation was complete. The domestic catastrophe inside Russia, the effects were immediate and catastrophic. The Moscow Stock Exchange suspended trading indefinitely. Major Russian corporations saw their international operations seized or frozen. The technological isolation hit particularly hard. Russian users lost access to YouTube, Google services, Apple's App Store, and Microsoft's cloud services within days. But the political damage was even more severe. Putin's carefully constructed image as a strong leader who could stand up to the West crumbled overnight. State television tried to spin the story, but leaked portions of the conversation made it impossible to deny Putin's humiliation. In the oligarch community, whispers of discontent grew louder. Some began reaching out through intermediaries to Western intelligence services, offering information in exchange for relief from sanctions. Others simply fled, abandoning their Russian assets for whatever they could salvage abroad. Even within Putin's inner circle, cracks began to show. Defense Minister Shoigu was overheard telling associates that the boss made a strategic error. Foreign Minister Lavrov reportedly told European counterparts that he had advised against the call, but been overruled. The strategic triumph for Trump, the call represented the perfect convergence of personal satisfaction and strategic victory. He had not only rejected Putin's desperate plea, but had used it to achieve something previous administrations had only dreamed of: the complete economic and diplomatic isolation of Russia from the global community. The domestic political benefits were immediate. Democrats who had spent years questioning Trump's relationship with Putin were forced to acknowledge that no previous president had The technological dark age was unprecedented. Russian businesses lost cloud computing, banks couldn't process transactions, and millions found Gmail accounts inaccessible. YouTube terminated, Apple devices unable to update. Russian alternatives proved pathetically inadequate. The RuNet initiative crashed within hours. Russian-developed alternatives to YouTube and Facebook became ghost towns. The European leaders abandoned neutrality with shocking speed. French President Macron declared that Putin's late-night begging demonstrates the bankruptcy of Russian leadership. German Chancellor Scholz announced accelerated energy independence. We cannot rely on a leader who calls adversaries at 4 a.m. begging for relief. Most devastatingly, Hungary's Viktor Orbán, Putin's most reliable EU ally, declared that Hungary must reconsider relationships with leaders who demonstrate such weakness. The betrayal by his closest European partner was perhaps more painful than Trump's insults, the Chinese response. Perhaps most devastating was China's quiet abandonment of their unlimited friendship. Xi Jinping saw Putin's humiliation as an opportunity to curry favor with America. Chinese banks restricted credit to Russian entities, tech companies suspended joint ventures, and media began calling Russia a regional power. When Putin desperately reached out to Xi, the Chinese leader kept him waiting 6 days before agreeing to a brief 12-minute call, 6 minutes shorter than Putin's humiliation with Trump. The domestic Russian catastrophe inside Russia, the effects of Trump's brutal rejection rippled through every level of society. State television anchors, normally masters of propaganda spin, struggled to explain why their great leader had called America seeking dialogue, the euphemism Kremlin media used to avoid admitting Putin had begged. But the real damage was economic. The ruble's collapse accelerated into freefall as international currency markets absorbed the reality of Russia's complete isolation. Basic goods became unaffordable overnight. Gas stations ran out of fuel as international suppliers refused to accept rubles. Grocery stores emptied as import-dependent supply chains collapsed. The psychological impact on ordinary Russians was perhaps most significant. For years, Putin had built his legitimacy on the promise of restoring Russian greatness and standing up to the West. The revelation that he had called America, begging for relief, shattered that carefully constructed narrative. Protests began in St. Petersburg and spread to Moscow within days. Not the typical opposition demonstrations that Putin had easily suppressed for years, but spontaneous gatherings of ordinary citizens who felt betrayed by their leader's weakness. The crowds chanted, "Shame," and "Putin the beggar," slogans that would have been unthinkable just weeks earlier. The intelligence community's assessment. 6 months after the call, the CIA produced a classified assessment that would later be partially declassified and released to Congress. The report, titled Putin's Strategic Miscalculation, Psychological and Political Implications, concluded that the phone call represented the most significant intelligence victory over Russian leadership since the end of the Cold War. The psychological profile of Putin post-call painted a picture of a leader in crisis. Intelligence assets reported that he had become paranoid and erratic, suspecting betrayal from even his closest advisors. He had reportedly stopped eating meals prepared by his regular chef, fearing poisoning from within his own circle. More significantly, the assessment concluded that Putin's position as an effective leader of Russia had been permanently compromised. The combination of economic collapse, international isolation, and domestic unrest had created what the CIA termed a cascade failure of authoritarian legitimacy. The report's most damning conclusion was that Putin had accomplished something years of American policy had failed to achieve. He had single-handedly destroyed Russia's credibility as a great power through one desperate phone call. The new global order, as 2026 began, the world looked fundamentally different. Russia had been reduced from global power to regional pariah. China learned that challenging America carried catastrophic risks. European unity was strengthened. Most importantly, American global leadership was decisively reasserted. The red phone would ring many more times, but never again would a world leader call America from weakness, expecting anything other than complete destruction of their position. The final lesson, years later, diplomatic historians identified this as the moment the post-Cold War era definitively ended, not with military conflict, but with 18 minutes of psychological warfare that left one of the world's most feared leaders broken and humiliated. Putin had gambled that Trump's business background would make him amenable to deals. Instead, he discovered the new Trump was something far more dangerous, a leader who understood that some offers must be rejected not just completely, but brutally. The 3:47 a.m. phone call would be studied for decades as a masterclass in psychological warfare and American power. But for those who lived through it, it would always be remembered as the moment Putin called America begging for mercy and learned what happens when America says no.